The past 2 years have really been a living hell.
A tragedy on the water
My brother's soul still doesn't rest in peace.
has left one Henrico family broken and angry.
I feel small and insignificant.
And feeling betrayed by the justice system.
They are kings of the county when they are elected.
Specifically, a prosecutor who they say has hung them out to dry. And in this small riverfront community, they aren't the only ones who are frustrated.
There seems to be a little disconnect.
Lancaster County Sheriff Patrick McCraney's office is located right next door to that of Commonwealth's attorney Jan Smith. But it sometimes seems like they are miles apart. The sheriff tells CBS 6 that Smith has far too often refused to take cases to trial, either setting criminal charges aside, negotiating plea deals favorable to the defense, or dismissing cases altogether.
There's been some disappointment, quite a bit. Hurt, frustration.
Case in point, this article in the Rappahannock Record, where Smith claims he had to dismiss a murder case because there was, quote, information that law enforcement knew or should have known concerning evidence that could have created doubt in the Commonwealth's case, end quote. That quote led to 4 detectives penning this letter to the editor disputing Smith's claim.
I like him. He's a nice guy. He just doesn't have a handle on his job here, in my opinion.
Veteran Detective Steve Sorensen signed the letter.
He's blamed us before, or we've been blamed before, that we couldn't proceed because there was not enough evidence. It can't happen that way all the time.
What kind of precedent does that set in a community when what you're perceiving here is justice not being carried through?
That you can get away with just about everything.
One recent case making headlines here, the death of 31-year-old Graham McCormick, who was killed in a boating accident on the Rappahannock River in August of 2017. McCormick's friend, Rand Hooper, is charged with involuntary manslaughter. According to investigators, Hooper was piloting the boat drunk when it crashed into a bulkhead, throwing McCormick overboard. They say Hooper then left the scene without trying to find and help his friend. A civil lawsuit was settled, but the criminal case was supposed to go to trial on June 19th. According to McCormick's family, Smith negotiated a plea deal with Hooper's attorneys, where he would plead guilty to the 2 felony charges in exchange for 1 year in a local jail. It's a deal the McCormicks do not support.
I would really like to see somebody take this to trial and give it the trial that it deserves.
In a court filing, an attorney for the McCormick family says that Smith appeared unprepared for the trial and had not even visited the accident scene until more than a year and a half after the crash, and only did so after being urged to by Chip Woodson, the man who owns the property where the body was found.
It's home.
The lawyer also claims Smith told both Woodson and McCormick's father that the judge had expressed some doubts to him about the Commonwealth's case.
I just want justice to be done.
Woodson was so outraged by that apparent breach of legal ethics, he wrote the judge.
I couldn't tell what was going to happen, and so when I had the chance to say how it has impacted me, I wrote the letter.
On June 19th, Lancaster County Judge Michael McKenney recused himself from the case, telling a stunned courtroom that he never spoke to Smith about the case and wanted to restore integrity. The McCormicks now want Smith removed from the case and for a special prosecutor to take over, while Hooper's attorneys want him to remain. In a recent legal filing, they argue McCormick's parents have no legal standing to pursue their motion for a special prosecutor. Over the last few weeks, CBS 6 reached out to Jan Smith several times in several ways, but received no response. We eventually caught up with him outside of his office.
Do you have a second?
No, thank you.
But didn't get answers to our questions.
I know you're an elected official, so it seems like you would want to answer questions.
Bye.
Detective Sorensen says he is also left wanting some answers, and a prosecutor who is more willing to work with law enforcement.
Is he cut out for the job?
I wouldn't vote for him again if that answers your question.
Jan Smith is up for re-election this November. We found the Virginia State Bar has disciplined him twice in the past, once in 2010 and again in 2012, for violating disciplinary rules that govern competence, diligence, communication, and failure to respond to a lawful demand for information from a disciplinary authority. Working for you, I'm Melissa Hippolyte for CBS 6. Cozy and historic. It's a place where people walk their dogs by college kids heading out for a night of fun. The streets of this Richmond neighborhood fan out like the spokes of a wheel. But sometimes, when alcohol is involved, things can spin out of control. July 17th, 2011. According to court records from a civil lawsuit, Kevin Van Fossen sees a casual acquaintance, Rand Hooper, standing outside the Fan House restaurant on Floyd Avenue. Hooper tells Van Fossen he has been snorting Vicodin and planning to drink Jack Daniels at the bar all night. Later, around 1 a.m., Van Fossen sees Hooper again. This time, Hooper and 3 friends are visibly intoxicated in the back seat of his vehicle. Richmond detective Anthony Coates worked the case.
There was numerous cans of cases of beer in the truck, and everyone said they were all out drinking.
As Van Fossen tells Hooper he is going home to bed, Hooper steps out of his vehicle holding a gun and aims it at him. Then, according to the civil suit filed by Van Fossen, without cause or provocation, Hooper fires the gun, shooting Van Fossen in the right arm. Hooper and a friend helped Van Fossen across the street to the ER at Retreat Hospital. Police later arrest Hooper, charging him with 2 misdemeanors. Inside his car, Detective Coates says police found an arsenal.
Who actually rides around with 2 assault rifles, a shotgun, and a 9mm Beretta? He had ammunitions for the assault rifle, extra shotgun shells, baggies of 9mm, boxes of 223s, and boxes of 9mm. I mean, he was ready for combat.
When Coates questions Hooper about what happened,
He tells me that he doesn't recall any incident at all that night, and this was probably about maybe an hour or hour and a half after the incident.
Under fire for offering a man 1 year in jail for allegedly boating drunk and leaving a friend to drown.
this case centers around the death of Graham McCormick. The 31-year-old was found dead. It's a response similar to what a different group of investigators would hear from Rand Hooper years later. As CBS 6 has been reporting on for months, Hooper is now accused of killing one of his best friends. 31-year-old Graham McCormick was found dead in the Rappahannock River back on August 10th of 2017. Lancaster County deputies say Hooper was piloting his boat drunk when it crashed into a bulkhead, throwing McCormick overboard. They say Hooper then left the scene without trying to find and help his friend. Lancaster Commonwealth's attorney Jan Smith says Hooper originally said he thought his friend fell off the dock and denied taking his boat out the night of the crash. But Smith says Hooper ultimately remembered going on the boat ride with McCormick, but could not recall who was driving.
My brother's soul still doesn't rest in peace.
A civil lawsuit filed by the McCormick family against Hooper has been settled, but he now faces 2 felony charges, including involuntary manslaughter.
Nice camera you got.
Hooper was prepared to accept a controversial plea agreement back in August that would put him behind bars for 1 year. But the McCormick family spoke out against the deal, accusing the prosecutor of being too lenient.
The punishment didn't fit the crime.
Now, a new judge in the case has given them hope that the penalty may ultimately be stiffer. Judge Herbert Hewitt has requested a pre-sentence report before deciding whether or not to accept the plea bargain. That pre-sentence report, due back in December, should list anything criminal in Hooper's past, from the fan shooting to underage possession of alcohol in Goochland in 2005 to 2 DUIs, one Prince Edward in 2009 and a second in Richmond 2 years before the boat crash. A history the McCormick family hopes will lead the judge to reject the plea and take this case to trial.
Yeah, I would really like to see somebody take this to trial and give it the trial that it deserves.
Rand Hooper was ultimately found guilty of one misdemeanor in the Van Fossen case, brandishing a firearm. He was sentenced to 12 months behind bars. 11 months and 28 days of that were suspended. Van Fossen ended up surviving the shooting. His civil case against Hooper and his father, Gary Hooper, was settled. Working for you, I'm Melissa Hippolyte for CBS 6. As the seasons change, so can our elected officials.
Glad it's over.
But rarely do you see an incumbent's popularity plummet like that of the top prosecutor in Lancaster County. In 2015, Jan Smith became Commonwealth's attorney, winning 52% of the vote.
Thank you very much.
4 years later, he's lost that job, receiving just 15% in the recent election.
That's really fairly extraordinary.
CBS 6 political analyst Dr. Bob Halsworth.
What occurred here is that you had this community revulsion at a particular event.
That event, an alcohol-fueled crash on the Rappahannock River in August of 2017. Investigators say Graham McCormick was thrown out of a boat and left for dead by his friend Rand Hooper. Smith offered Hooper a controversial plea agreement, 1 year behind bars, in exchange for a guilty plea. But McCormick's family opposed the deal, saying it was way too lenient, and they even tried to get Smith removed from their case.
He was supposed to be helping us. We trusted him. We put our faith in him for years, 2 years. And he took total advantage of us and then tried to silence us when we wanted to voice dissent.
CBS 6 has tried to ask Smith about the case several times, but he has declined to comment. Do you have a second?
No, thank you.
Certainly his unwillingness to, in many ways, defend publicly a decision that was very controversial contributed, I think, to the public concern about what was happening.
Meanwhile, some of the detectives who work with Smith did something unusual. They openly revolted against him.
I like him. He's a nice guy. He just doesn't have a handle on his job here, in my opinion.
They even publicly supported one of Smith's opponents.
Had you ever, in your years working in law enforcement, had to proactively go out there and kind of campaign against the Commonwealth's attorney?
No, ma'am, I have not. Never. This was the first and last.
4 months later, Detective Steve Sorensen says the landslide loss surprised him.
I really, truly thought it'd be close.
Both Sorensen and Sheriff Patrick McCraney believe voters listened to what the McCormicks and law enforcement had to say.
The stories that Channel 6 did, that was people saw them. People paid attention to them.
Well, obviously, the McCormick boating case did not help. The news stories from Channel 6, the newspaper, certainly didn't help his case.
Lancaster's new Commonwealth's attorney, Tony Spencer, will take office January 1, and the sheriff and his detectives say they look forward to repairing the relationship with the prosecutor's office.
Do you feel like Lancaster County will be safer going forward?
I do believe the citizens will be very well represented. Victims, absolutely.
I'm looking forward to going to court and actually see cases tried.
Like the McCormick case, which now hinges on whether or not a judge accepts the plea deal brokered by Jan Smith. If he doesn't, it's back to square one with a brand new prosecutor.
I'd love to see it go to court. I think it's a good case.
We reached out to Jan Smith for this story, but have not heard back. Judge Herbert Hewitt is expected to make his decision about the plea agreement on December 19th at 9 a.m. We will be in the courtroom and bring you the very latest. Working for you, I'm Melissa Hippolyte for CBS 6. A cold and malignant heart. Those are the words that Judge Herbert Hewitt used to describe Rand Hooper based on his actions after allegedly piloting a boat while drunk, crashing it, and then leaving his friend for dead. Ending the suspense, Hewitt told spectators it was overwhelming to the court that Hooper made no effort to help his friend Graham McCormick after he fell out of the boat during the crash and instead left him to die. Hewitt then called a controversial plea deal brokered by Commonwealth's attorney Jan Smith inappropriate before rejecting it. The deal would have put Hooper behind bars for 1 year in exchange for a guilty plea. McCormick's family did not support the plea deal and felt it wasn't harsh enough. They tried to get Smith removed from the case, and even the detectives in the case spoke out publicly against Smith, calling him incompetent. The McCormicks and the detectives say they feel vindicated.
I finally feel like now I can take my hands off the wheel. I can start to move on with my life knowing that this is now in good hands, competent hands.
I don't know that any outcome would have felt good because I'm still going to wake up on Christmas morning without my brother, but I think that this was a step in the right direction, so that will make this holiday season easier for my family.
We wanted this to go to trial, and I believe the family really wants it to go to trial, so we're looking forward to it.
Now, after the plea was rejected, Rand Hooper withdrew his guilty plea, and the judge gave Hooper the option to request a new judge for the case, which he did. A trial date will be set on January 24th, and a new CA, Tony Spencer, will prosecute the case. Jan Smith lost re-election in November, getting less than 15% of votes. Working for you, I'm Melissa Hippolyte for CBS 6.